Ms. Legalista here. Welcome to the video. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me start by saying this. I got teary eyed reading this particular sentencing letter. Now, I have read sentencing letters in the past. For instance, when I was covering a lot of what went on with Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes, I read through a lot of the sentencing letters. For instance, there was this one from Cory Booker, Senator Booker, and I had the feeling that it was something that maybe his legislative assistant wrote. Then he sort of reviewed it and signed off on it. There was nothing personal to it. It talked about the criminal justice system at large. There was nothing personal that made you feel like he had a connection with her and really wanted to speak to her character. It was just missing. I also did sentencing memos, sentencing letters, not memos. I'm not writing any memos here. Sentencing letters for the Chrisleys when they were going through their whole fraud thing with the government. There was one from uh, Julie Chrisley's best friend, and I went through that one. So I've done this before. And this one was a little different, though, because this particular letter that I'm going to go through in this video is from the son of one of the victims. And this is the victim who lost the $90,000 that she had saved to buy her house. Now, I have been in situations before where I have worked with clients who have been scammed or defrauded out of money. I had one call me one time, and when she told me the story of what happened, it was the typical scenario we see in real estate transactions when it comes to purchasing a home. You have the real estate attorney, the realtor, and both of these industries, the legal industry and the real estate industry, have tried to warn the people, the practitioners, to be on the lookout for scam emails, for this, for that, and to notify your clients of things not to do. If you get an email telling you to now all of a sudden wire the funds over here, don't do it. Call up your broker, your mortgage loan originator, whoever, and say, hey, I got this email. Is this something I'm supposed to be doing? The scammers are out there working 24/7, taking no holidays off. I don't even think they sleep at night. These people work harder than most working class people out here every day just trying to make a living. They are working hard to take it from you. And that is what happened to this person who called me and tried to get her money back, and it was gone. And it was a down payment for a house she was supposed to be closing on. So I look at this and I read this. And when you have worked with people who are trying to buy their first home, you know how much the struggle can impact you on a day-to-day basis when you're trying to save up this money. You're trying to find something that will actually fit into your budget. And when you finally think you get there, to have that rug pulled from underneath you and to feel like you will never, ever be there again has to be the biggest emotional loss, next to maybe losing a family member or something like that. Has to be one of the biggest emotional losses you can ask a person to endure. Well, I want to jump over to this letter. So, you know Lamar Whitehead going to jail, we know that now, but let's hear the story behind some of this, because it can all sound very technical when people are saying, yes, he was found guilty of wire fraud and attempted wire fraud and mail fraud and that kind of stuff. But it's the stories that really matter, because in the end, none of this really happens without this person coming forward and being able to say, this is what happened to me. This is what this person did. This is what he said. So let's jump over to that, and let me pull that up so we can take a look at this. And as you see, this was, and this is not me crying. My eyes get teary-eyed in the morning because it's allergies, morning allergies, sneezing, coughing, eyes, nose, all of that. So my eyes have been really like watery this morning, extra watery, more watery than I need for them to be. So here is the letter. Okay. This is the letter that's coming from the son here, and it's called A Victim Impact Statement. It's from Rashid Anderson as Exhibit B to the government's sentencing submission. Now, the government's sentencing submission looks nothing like this. It's going to be a whole lot of pages because they have to go through this whole process of coming up with a range of what they think is appropriate under the circumstances. And so they have to look at the facts and they have to be able to provide documentation of how they came to this reasoning. What was the analysis? Here's how we got there. Well, if you're the victim or you're the victim's son, you get to write a statement and share it with the court because you were the person who was harmed in this. And it's only fair that your impact be taken into consideration. And while she did make a verbal statement, I want to read this letter. I want to go through this letter and sort of break this down again so that we really understand the impact that fraud and scams have on people at a personal level, not just this legal thing where they're charged with this and yeah, understanding the impact on the family. My name is Rashid Anderson, and I am writing this statement to express the profound and devastating impact that Lamar Whitehead's actions have had on myself, my mother, Pauline Anderson, and our entire family. I was born and raised in Jamaica. I am 30 years old, married, and have two children. I have dedicated myself to building a better future for my family. My mother, who was married at the time, was left to care for me as a baby and my 3-year-old brother when my father ran off to the United States. So already we get some background here that sort of sets the stage in terms of her, well, first of all, the son recognizing what he wanted for his family, and then sort of laying the groundwork for part of it was, well, here's how she's going to support the family. And look at this struggle already. Like already her husband's left. He's run off to the United States. And here he is just a baby and he's got a 3-year-old brother and the mother is left to take care of that by herself. He says, I met my father once when I was 8 and never saw him again. My mother's strength and resilience in raising us alone have always been a source of inspiration for me. Unfortunately, the crime committed by the defendant has caused significant emotional, financial, and physical distress to us all. I can imagine. I was used and taken advantage of. And because of that, every day I have to see my mother suffer due to Lamar Whitehead's deceit, which is incredibly painful. Now, part of this is his mother's story, but part of this is his story too. If you're the person that said, hey, here's somebody who can help you get on this path so that you can get a home, and you now feel all of that responsibility for essentially putting this into motion. You wake up every day thinking, had I not introduced them, had we not had conversations with him, had we not gone down this path, had I said something, so had I done something differently. So you can imagine that he is feeling a great deal of remorse and responsibility for this. My mother, who is 58 years old, was defrauded out of $90,000 by the defendant. This incident has severely affected her and our family in ways that words can hardly capture. My mother, a native of Jamaica, was the first of her mother's 7 children. She spent her teen years focused on achieving a career and creating opportunities for her less fortunate siblings. She completed her nursing degree in Jamaica, became an international nurse, worked in Scotland, London, and Florida, and finally settled in New York. Despite becoming a single mother, she saved diligently, supported us financially, and helped her siblings in Jamaica complete their education. Her dream of buying a home has been a lifelong ambition, but she has always selflessly put the needs of others above her own. For some people, for many people out there, especially with the cost of houses rising, it feels like every day they're going up, right? it can almost feel like you will never get there. I'll never save enough money because every time I think I'm going to hit that goal, the price goes up so much that now I got to set a new goal. Otherwise, I am not going to be able to afford it because the prices keep going up. And so you keep working. There's this struggle. You're a single mom. You're trying to put all the pieces together because in the end, one of the things you really want to do is to have your own home, especially for your kids, a place where they feel safe, a place where they can say, remember when we were children and we were in the backyard doing, you like for your kids to have those kinds of memories. And yet, he feels like this was definitely taken away from her, especially since she had this pathway where she had worked so hard to get where she was. And it apparently wasn't just her supporting the children. He says, my mother has always been the driving force behind my brother and me, pushing us towards success in education and life. When we finished one degree, this so sounds like my mom when I read this. When we finished one degree, she encouraged us to pursue the next. What about your master's? She would say. When that was finished, she asked, what about your doctorate? I'm not kidding. My mother did that. As a form of encouragement, she suggested, let's all do this together, you, me, and Miguel. Despite her acute illness, her focus was always on providing for her family and achieving her lifelong dream of buying a home. The defendant broke her soul. And when she saw the text messages he sent her, she was devastated. Even now, whenever she talks about this, she either tears up or outright cries. It hurts me as her son to see her like this since she has been defrauded. You guys, I have a hard time reading this. I am telling you, I have a hard time reading this. Um, I like I said, I want to capture the personal side of some of these stories. And one of the things that sort of came up when I was talking about the Chrisleys was the granddaughter and the government wanting both both of the Chrisleys to serve their sentences at the same time. And as we know, what happens with that is the granddaughter then goes to stay with their daughter, Savannah, right? But the thing about it is they could have done that in such a way so that, Todd served and then Julie served. They could have split it up so that the granddaughter still had some stability in her life. So how do you in that now that's a totally different circumstance because they were the ones who sort of did wrong there. But the collateral damage to the family is something I think that gets undervalued sometimes. The granddaughter, where are the concerns about the impact on her in that case? Split the sentence maybe. Consider having one in jail at one time and one in jail at another time. But, oh well, who am I? And just sort of say how these things ought to go. So that was one of those instances where I was in my feelings about that. But this is hurtful even for me to read. So it can be very difficult to sort of read some of these personal statements and not feel some kind of way when you're reading them. My mother and I, who trusted the defendant, believed that her investment was safe, and the betrayal she experienced led to severe emotional distress. She suffers from depression and anxiety, feelings that are compounded by the trauma of the fraud. My grandmother, who is 77, and my aunt, who is battling a brain tumor, have also been deeply affected. The stress of this situation has taken a toll on my entire family's mental health. Of course it has. My wife, Jeriana, lives in constant fear of potential retaliation from the defendant, which only adds to our collective anxiety and sense of insecurity. The $90,000 that my mother lost was not just a financial blow, but a devastating setback to her plans of finding and purchasing a home. Like I said, now you got to start back over from ground zero, right? He's going to jail, even if they liquidate whatever assets he has, if anything, because the property is being foreclosed on. Anything that has a lien on it is going to be taken back to those parties that hold those loans. All right. Additionally, our family has spent over 50,000 in a civil lawsuit against the defendant in an attempt to recover the stolen funds. These expenses have drained our savings and diverted resources that could have been used to secure my mother's future and well-being. Remember, she is 58 years old. A lot of people at that point are starting to look at retirement. My husband's mentioning it all the time now. He's like, the clock is ticking, honey. Next February, I'm done. He goes, I'm done. Additionally, our family has spent over 50,000 in a civil lawsuit against the defendant in an attempt to recover the stolen funds. These expenses have drained our savings and diverted resources that could have been used to secure my mother's future and well-being. I work tirelessly daily to build my real estate business, striving to provide for my family and help my mother achieve her dream of home ownership. However, the drawn-out civil case has made it incredibly challenging to progress. Like, how do you ever get ahead? You feel like you're never going to get there. The stress and anxiety from this situation have also impacted me and my mother's physical health. She has experienced increased blood pressure and other stress related health issues. The overall well being of our family has deteriorated as we struggle to cope with the emotional and financial strain. Almost 4 years have been lost, and you can't get that time back, right? Let me distinguish between two things here. They can go to court and sue her and try to get sue him, try to get the money back, right? He can try to build up his real estate money to get some money back. Maybe they can do that, and then he can help get her a home. But you can't get the time back. You can't get back the sense of well-being and security that you would have felt all those 4 years. No, you just had stress for 4 years. You just had anxiety every time you woke up in the morning. And there's no way to really repair that damage or to get that time back. That's forever going to be with them. And like I said, while his mother was the one who was defrauded, the whole family suffers the collateral consequences. And he is suffering just as his mother is suffering. And that's the point that he's trying to get across here. Almost 4 years have been lost. All right. With more medical challenges, escalating legal fees, and not a cent of that money has been returned to date. There are no words to explain my mother's grief and loss fully, but she continues to push on for herself and our family. That's when you get up every day and you pray, you get up every day and you do it again, and you go through the struggle day in and day out. In conclusion, the defendant's fraudulent actions have caused irreparable harm to my mother and our entire family. We have been emotionally devastated, financially strained, and physically impacted by this crime. I hope the court considers the severe consequences of his actions and sees the suffering he has caused. And we hope for resolution that will prevent him from harming others in the future. Thank you for allowing me to share our story. Our story. Sincerely, Rashid Anderson. So that gives you some insight into what the family was feeling, what the family was going through, and where they are now. This sort of feeling that they're always going to be struggling, and they may not even get to the point where she gets to buy a house. She may not ever see that $90,000. And she's going to be in a situation where she's feeling this anxiety and grief over what happened to her. So that is a whole lot. That is a whole lot. And you can sort of understand why it's important for victim impact statements to be included when the judge is looking at what the sentencing ought to be. So I hope this gives you a little bit more insight and understanding about how this works, what happened in this case. And I will also be sharing a few more of these as I go through the documents. So don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Peace.